Most lifters don't have a strength problem, they have a force absorption problem. If your eccentric strength is underdeveloped, you're leaving half of your power on the gym floor. Most athletes will train the lift, few train the lowering phase or the eccentric phase, and that's where real strength, tendon resilience, and explosive strength potential are built. Today, I'm going to talk about one of the most underused and misunderstood tools in performance training: weight releases, a method used to forge tendon durability, neurological efficiency, and a fucking nuclear option for force production. One of my favorite tools of all time, the weight releases. So, one thing is with the weight releases, what they actually do is they overload the eccentric of the lifting phase. And this isn't something that's a new TikTok hack. It's not just a gimmick that you'll put onto your lifting. It's proven, it's decades old, and it's weapon forged by some of the most brutal results driven labs in the world. Bit of a historical backdrop of this. So back in the 1950s or 60s in the Soviet Union, back in Russia, these guys were always looking for that advantage. Now, there was a heap of methods they used, but the weight release is one of the things they came up with. Essentially, this traces back to Eastern Bloc sports science. Okay, this is used in their what they call their shock method or their eccentric overload method. This was some of the notable names with this was a guy named Yuri Chansky, and he was one of the sports scientists or the people working on methods to blow up these Soviet athletes. Their aim for this was to increase neural output, tendon strength, and they started to see that overloading the eccentric would just improve the force output of their athletes faster than anything. Then it got to the Western world, and Louis Simmons was one of the first to sort of take this on in a big way at Westside Barbell. He brought this into modern strength circles in the 2000s. Louis said that there was nothing like the weight releases to prime the CNS. It was just something that set you up, primed you, and got so much strength out of you that it was one of the best tools they had in their toolbox. Charles Poliquin worked out that he could drive a lot of distal hypertrophy in his athletes and essentially bulletproof his athletes, because when you're using eccentric weight releases, as that muscle is lengthening, you're resisting force and you're teaching the muscles to be stronger as they lengthen. One of the things that have been found out recently is they just thought that muscle fibers were just muscle fibers along the thing, but along the entire belly of the muscle. But what we've actually found out is that there is actually little micro tendons that hold each of the muscle fibers together. And one of the things that Charles Poliquin did using the eccentric overloads was he used it to thicken the joints and the tendons. But we now know that you're actually thickening all of those little micro tendons along the muscle fibers as well. And that is why it's one of the best methods to actually improve and strengthen muscles and tendons as well. And this was something that Charles credited for making his athletes extremely resilient. Luke Lehman, he's been one of my mentors at times. He actually gave me a method one time where he programmed def sets. And essentially what this was is he'd build up to something like a 3 or a 5 RM just on straight bar weight. Then he'd take off 15 to 20%, add that back on with the weight releases. So he'd have 85% or 80 to 85% of his 5 RM on the bar. He'd add on 15 to 20% onto the weight releases, and then he'd do an AMRAP of cluster reps, controlling that eccentric down. And he said, and I've seen from my own results, is like nothing gave him more of a hypertrophy response or a muscle growth response than that used in a very, very short window. Christian Thibaudeau calls these the nuclear weapon of strength gains, and great coaches around the world are using these and have used them to produce some exceptional results with the strength. Now, why this matters is eccentric overload develops everything most athletes ignore, so especially in athletic performance, but also sometimes in the strength world as well. We're building tendon resilience, the stuff that prevents tears. As I said, it thickens the tendons, it thickens those little micro tendons, and also strengthens the muscle while it's under a lengthening phase. It improves your neural efficiency. So it is going to improve the rate coding, the firing rate of your muscles, and it's going to teach you to contract more of that muscle over time. One of the things that it does also very, very well is it does increase the recruitment of fast twitch muscle fibers as you overload that eccentric. So if you're looking to get faster and more explosive, it's something that's going to improve that really, really quickly as well. Um, it also builds what we call our strength reserve. So eccentric strength is your true capacity. Think of it as that, let's say you've got a 100 kilo concentric only squat. Everybody should have at least a 40% higher eccentric strength. So you should be able to eccentrically lower 140 kilos. The more you have in the strength capacity, the more you're able to tap into more of that concentric strength later on. So it can be something that even if you just marginally improve your eccentric strength, your concentric strength is going to go up a lot. Um, so the science with this is it does build distal hypertrophy, muscle thickness near the tendons. It equals injury resistance. Strengthens the microtendons, which I talked about before. It conditions the GTO, the Golgi tendon organ, which is a little center that inhibits muscle contraction or forceful muscle contraction. So this can the GTO can suppress strength up to 50%. Okay, and so using the eccentric overloading, you can actually reduce that inhibition and get more out of the strength that you already have. This is why if you look at a 70-kilo weightlifter, and they're able to snatch 160, 170 kilos, and they're not huge people. They're just very, very, very efficient because they've taught their body to make the most of every single fiber in their body. And they've also turned down that little safety switch, which is the GTO. It boosts motor unit recruitment, firing rates, and control under load, which I also think is probably one of the most underrated use cases of weight releases. It teaches you to be very solid with your technique because as they're swinging around, it is going to show up any deficiencies in your movement pattern, bar path, all of that as well. So what the cool thing is about this is with eccentric overloads, you're not just lifting more weight, you're lowering with intent, and that changes everything about your lifting. And it gives you some great payoffs. So let's look at where the opportunities lie in this and then also break it into its applications. So we have different ways or different methods that we can use with our weight releases, and I'll go a little bit into the programming. Now, one of the things is you're generally going to use a weight releaser in an intensification phase. So once you've built up the strength capacity, generally using straight bar weight, then you can go into building up with either quasi-maximal eccentrics or supra-maximal eccentrics for an intensification phase. And so why this will make it will blow up your strength really, really fast is one, you're building that eccentric capacity. Two, as you got the weight releases on, it gives you this little bit of an unstableness. So as you're squatting or as you're bench pressing, you're going to have to fire up more of that stabilization. And you're going to have to become a more stable, more stiff athlete. Your trunk will thicken, your shoulders are going to thicken, your upper back's going to thicken. And you'll just find that in terms of strength and hypertrophy, it's something that's going to blow everything up. So the first method you can use is called a quasi or a maximal eccentric. And these methods are ideal for intensifications and hypertrophy as well. So the first one is going to give you an average load of around 80 to 85%. And when we look at strength building or strength and hypertrophy maximizing, that around that average intensity of 80 to 85% is probably one of the best areas we can for long-term strength progression. Now, generally what you're going to do with this is on the bar, you're going to have about 70% load. And then on the weight releases, you're going to have somewhere between 10 to 20% extra on the eccentric. So it's about 90% total. What you can do with this is you're generally going to use about 4 to 6 reps and you're going to control it for 4 to 5 seconds. Okay, and so start off if you get your 4 reps and you're able to control it for 4 seconds, the next week you'll go to 5 seconds. If you get the 4 reps, next week go to 6 reps. Okay. And it's a great method to build a lot of strength and hypertrophy. The next methods we're going to talk about is you're peaking your strength for super maximal and advanced super maximal lifting. These are lifts where we're starting to add more than our 1 rep max onto the weight releases or the total weights. Okay, what you're going to do is these are used near the end of a phase or a neurological overload and limit strength phase. So what these methods do is they start to build that eccentric buffer or that eccentric capacity. And when you use these, and if you use them really, really well, you can actually use them to max out and peak your strength potential. And what we're going to do to set it up really well is you'll start off with somewhere around 75 to 80%. Generally, 80% is what you're going to have on the straight bar. And then with the weight releases, you're going to have somewhere between 10 and 30% on the bar. Okay. For our super maximal, okay, and this is just 80% on the bar, 10 to 20% on your weight releases. You'll do these in a cluster set fashion where you'll do 1 rep, 4 to 5 seconds down, weight releases pop off, re-rack the bar, 15 to 45 seconds later, you'll do another rep. This is going to give you a lot of reps at that 90 to 95% weight range, which is starting to really recruit all of those high threshold fibers, and this is really starting to get those maximal strength gains. Now the next part is probably one of my favorite peaking methods, and this is the advanced super maximal. And in this, the overall average intensity is 95 to 100%. So you're getting more and more reps at that 95 to 100% range, which is essentially maxing out most of the time. This is where the strength skill of one rep maxes is going to start to get a lot of practice. And this is going to start to teach you to express that maximal strength more and more and more. So what you do, once again, have 80% on the bar, and you're going to have somewhere between 20 and 40% extra on the weight releases. Now, we don't want to go really above 120% because the risk to reward at this point is starting to diminish really quickly. And what you'll do at this point is you'll aim for 1 to 2 reps in a cluster fashion with 4 to 5 seconds eccentric. If you get the 2 reps and you start to find that quite easy, next week what you'll do is you'll go 2 to 4 reps, okay? And you'll build it up in that cluster fashion. Generally, somewhere once you start to get to 3 to 6 reps, you're really starting to peak out and maximize this super maximal potential. I've found that if you're doing this for generally about the 2 to 4 weeks is a great period of time to be doing these super maximal with the eccentric overload. And somewhere in between that 3rd and 4th week, you're just going to be feeling like you're on. Okay. And what I find, and this is just me, I just enjoy to do this. And what we've found with our lifters is that, there'll be a point where that eccentric loading is just feeling super light. Start to add weight to the bar until you get up to that, 95 to 100%, and then go for a 1 RM. And you'll find, especially with the weight releases, that post-activation potentiation, you'll just find you start to hit some very large personal bests. And it can be a great way to lead into a peaking phase. So then the final way that we use weight releases is for peaking fast twitch and power potential. Okay, so what you'll do with this is you're going to set 55 to 60% on the bar, so relatively light weights on the bar, but you'll have 100 to 105% on the bar, so you're essentially going to overshoot your eccentrics. What you'll do, 5 seconds, let's say for a squat, and you're peaking an athlete who needs to be explosive, fast, or even a strength athlete like a weightlifter who needs to maximize the stretch reflex. What you'll do is 4 to 5 seconds to about parallel on, say, a squat or a bench press. That last little quarter, drop the weights, bang, explode back up, and then you're just going to do fast reps, okay? So slowly lower load up the eccentric, you'll find that all of the fast twitch muscle fibers are starting to activate very, very fast. You'll be so potentiated as those weights drop off. You'll find that your bar speed is going to be a lot higher, and you're going to teach the athlete to move faster. You're going to teach that peak power potential, and you'll find that you can get some very, very good explosive and power gains from a phase like this. So why all of this stuff works is it reduces GTO inhibition, which is your Golgi tendon. It enhances tendon adaptation and stretch reflexes. It amplifies fast twitch muscle fiber recruitment. So this is why weight releases can be such a great tool for athletes. Field and team sport athletes can be such a great tool because of that fast twitch muscle fiber development. It builds explosiveness, power output, and also motor control, which for someone who's getting to an advanced lifting stage, this can be something that really maximizes their strength potential once they've got good movement control as well. Christian Thibaudeau calls it the nuclear weapon of strength gains, and it is an absolutely beautiful tool. Now, this isn't something you mess around with. This is for athletes who want to weaponize their nervous system, and I've talked a lot recently about and maximizing your strength potential, and weight releases is something that builds that strength potential more and more. So it's a great tool to build the strength potential and lead into a peak phase. You'll find that the strength returns on this are absolutely phenomenal if you respect it by controlling that eccentric and use the right method. The elite chase these because they also reveal hidden weaknesses as well. So it will show up any deficiencies in your bar path, your movement patterns, or anywhere where you can't control that eccentric. That's where the weak point is, and it's probably going to show up a lot on your concentric. So it's very, very good. One thing you'll find too, using this on a bench press, one slow eccentrics on a bench press is something that will blow up the bench a lot really quickly, because as you're controlling and increasing the stiffness of that upper back, the rotator cuff, all of the little stabilizer muscles of the shoulder that make a bench press very strong, you'll find that using the overloaded eccentric will blow up your bench faster than anything. So it's very cool. And the beautiful thing about this is you don't need more and more weights. You don't need to be maxing out all the time. It's just you just need to make your lifting smarter. So big thing with this, if you want to program weight releases the right way, they are an incredible tool. You just need to know how to sequence it out and put it in the right sections. If this is something you are interested in, please feel to comment down below and ask me more questions on this, and I will do my best to answer all those questions. I hope you found this useful, and have a good